Supreme Court breathes new life into President Donald Trump's travel ban. The United Nations 2017 World Drug Report outlines the global opioid crisis. And how a New York baker is making internet trolls eat their words. Literally. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. U.S. President Donald Trump is savoring a partial victory in the fight to reinstate his travel ban. The Supreme Court on Monday allowed part of his revised travel ban to take effect until it reviews the issue definitely in October. President Trump's executive order bans granting new visas for travelers from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen for 90 days and suspends the U.S. refugee program for 120 days. Federal courts in Hawaii and Maryland blocked the so-called Muslim ban in March. Here's VOA's Laditza Hook.
President Trump hailed the court's decision Monday.
How do you feel about the Supreme Court ruling today, Mr. President? Very good, thank you. Very good.
While Trump said the ruling will help keep Americans safe, rights groups were quick to criticize it.
The very fact that the Supreme Court is agreeing to hear this flies in the face of a record of courts up and down the levels that have decided that this is an unjust and discriminatory Muslim ban.
Activists also are questioning the court stipulating that nationals of the 6 affected countries can only travel to the United States if they have a bona fide or authentic, verifiable relationship with people or organizations here.
That's incredibly vague language. Who's going to be making the decision? Presumably the same government who is trying to bar Muslim individuals from coming into this country.
But some say the Supreme Court's stipulation is not as limiting as it seems.
The primary category of people with no relationship would be tourists, but, student visas, you have a bona fide relationship with the university. Employment visas, you have an employer in the United States, family visas, etc. And for refugees, similarly, many categories of refugees have pre-existing and significant ties to the United States, whether through family or in the case of Iraqi refugees, because they've worked for the U.S. military in Iraq.
Betsy Fisher is policy director at the International Refugee Assistance Project. She spoke to us via Skype. Fisher says the order will go into effect Thursday, and many will be confused as to how it is to be implemented.
My organization will be publishing a Know Your Rights guide with updated information. We'll be responding again with volunteers to airports to make sure that this is implemented correctly, and that individuals are not stopped with no reason or held indefinitely for no reason.
Fisher says the Supreme Court will conduct a full constitutional analysis of the ban in October. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, in Sudan, residents in Khartoum reacted Tuesday to the partially reinstated Trump travel ban that targets citizens from 6 predominantly Muslim countries, including Sudan.
I hope Sudan is dropped from the travel ban list just like Iraq, because we have never heard of Sudanese people involved in terrorism or bombings.
Unfortunately, it was a wrong decision from Trump and his government. We were very happy with Obama for easing sanctions on Sudan. That was good news for us. Suddenly, Trump came and changed everything. There are families, businessmen, and doctors who have had to return.
This is injustice done to the Sudanese people and their rights. Maybe the United States are afraid of terrorism and the Islamic State group, but the decision needs to be reviewed and retracted.
A Sudanese foreign ministry official said he hopes the revival of Trump's travel ban on its citizens and those of 5 other Muslim majority states will not affect the planned lifting of U.S. economic sanctions next month. Well, President Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi are pledging to work together to boost security and trade ties. We get the details from VOA White House Bureau Chief Steve Herman.
Republic of India. Declaring his talks with President Trump very successful and very fruitful, the visiting Indian Prime Minister gave his host a trademark bear hug in the White House Rose Garden. Security was a major focus for their discussions. Modi announced increased cooperation on fighting terrorism, including enhanced sharing of intelligence.
The top priority for both President Trump and myself is to protect our societies from global challenges like terrorism. And because our aim is the strengthening of India and the USA, two great democracies in the world.
Trump said India and the United States can set an example for many other nations and make great strides in defeating common threats.
We will destroy radical Islamic terrorism.
Combining both the security and economic relationship, an expected multi-billion-dollar deal for American surveillance drones for the Indian Navy will make a dent in the $24 billion trade imbalance in India's favor. In a delegation meeting in the White House Cabinet Room, the president, flanked by his vice president and secretary of state, expressed appreciation for India ordering American defense equipment.
And there's nobody makes military equipment like we make military equipment. Nobody even close, so we want to thank you very much.
Although this is not billed as a state visit, White House officials say they rolled out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister. And this is the first time that President Trump at the White House is hosting a dinner for a visiting foreign leader. Steve Herman, VOA News, at the White House.
Well, the U.S. says it has identified potential preparations for a chemical attack by Syrian government forces, similar to an April attack in northern Syria that prompted U.S. airstrikes in response. A statement late Monday from White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer warned Syrian President Bashar al-Assad that if government forces do carry out another chemical attack, then he and his military will pay a heavy price. There was no specific information or evidence presented about the alleged preparations. The April 4th attack on the opposition-held town of Khan Shaykhun killed more than 80 people. Analysts by the French government found that sarin gas was used along with a stabilizer known as hexamine. Assad has rejected that his forces were responsible for what happened in Khan Shaykhun. U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis travels Thursday to Brussels, where he will consult with NATO allies on troops' contributions and other support in Afghanistan before announcing his own decision on increasing the number of U.S. forces in that war-torn country. But as VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb reports, the new strategy is likely to be more of the same.
The Pentagon has promised a new Afghanistan plan by mid-July. One analyst suggests the Trump administration's strategy won't be all that different from President Obama's plan.
Mattis and Trump are just repairing a mistake, in effect, that I think President Obama made, and it is, in a sense, more properly carrying out Obama's own strategy than Obama himself did.
The strategy will still focus on Afghan troops taking the lead on security. That mistake, Michael O'Hanlon says, was drawing down U.S. support from about 100,000 American troops in May 2011 to fewer than 10,000 American troops over a 4-year span.
That was probably too fast and too low. So by restoring just a few thousand more, I think we can get advisors out on the field with some of the key Afghan units and hopefully really stabilize the situation.
Secretary Mattis will work with NATO and other allies to increase their commitments to Afghanistan this week before finalizing his military plan.
What else they can bring to bear to help. So I know everyone wants to know what's going to happen, but the Secretary is being very deliberative and very thoughtful about what the commanders need and what's necessary to change the tide.
Officials say the new strategy also will need to stop elements of Pakistan's government from propping up the Taliban. And it will need to stop Islamic State's local affiliate from growing.
It's not getting better in Afghanistan in terms of ISIS. We have a problem, and we have to defeat, and we have to be focused on that problem.
Analysts say that while Islamic State numbers have increased in Afghanistan, the group's operational capabilities are severely stinted because the militants are defending themselves from both U.S. and Afghan attacks. Carla Babb, VOA News, the Pentagon.
Well, our next story is the first of a two-part series about an international human rights organization with a global network of activists that helps citizen journalists and human rights advocates film and document evidence so that abusers can be held accountable. It's called Witness, Listen Up. VOA Caroline Turner reports.
Have you ever seen a human rights violation and wish you could do something? Well, if you have a cell phone, you have a camera. If you have a camera, you can use it to document wrongdoing. The human rights organization, Witness, is training citizen advocates how to safely do this. Around the world, video is being used to expose abuses and advocate for change.
Increasingly, it's also being used as part of investigations and as legal evidence.
Video is a very important tool to collect evidence because it has a constant presence. Almost everyone has a phone that can shoot video. Cameras play an essential role in revealing the facts and exposing perpetrators. But the courts are still hesitant to accept video.
Lawyers face challenges around verifying, contextualizing, organizing, and preserving mass amounts of videos. They often struggle to collect key footage that could help bring down perpetrators.
Witness was founded exactly 25 years ago when a man from his balcony with an old-fashioned camcorder filmed the beating of an African-American man named Rodney King. And it was a realization that video or visual imagery can have a catalyzing effect on exposing human rights violations. And when victims' stories are denied, often people don't believe them. And when you actually film something, it becomes a truth that is undeniable.
Witness was founded by rock star Peter Gabriel.
My experience was going on this tour, the Human Rights Now tour for Amnesty International and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 40th anniversary. And it was really the first time that I came across people and looked at them eye to eye, and they told me that they'd been tortured, they'd seen family members murdered in front of them, one abuse after another, different countries around the world. And often they couldn't get justice. Those in power were able to get away with murder, torture, all forms of repression, because there wasn't the legal system, but there wasn't the media, the technology there that allowed witnesses to be seen and heard, and for their evidence to get out in front of the world.
The Witness.org website details classes and videos on how anyone can film events and organize and preserve their video so it could be used effectively in a court of law. Carolyn Turner, VOA News, Washington.
Well, be sure to tune in to Africa 54 tomorrow for part 2 of Witness, which deals with documenting and protecting yourself and your subjects. Well, economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa is rebounding in 2017 after registering the worst decline in more than 20 years in 2016. Now, the new Africa Pulse, a biannual analysis of the state of African economies conducted by the World Bank, says the region is showing signs of recovery and regional growth. An American multinational professional services firm, B360, is among the entities that are working to spur growth and development across Africa. Now, to discuss the situation, I'm joined by Peter Karenge. He's the CEO of B360. Welcome to Africa 54, Peter.
Thank you, Vincent.
So start by briefly just telling us what is B360 and what you do.
Thank you very much, Vincent. So B360, we are a multinational professional firm that offers services, including engineering, architectural, construction, and consulting services in various areas. These areas include real estate, infrastructure, energy, and health. We have professionals in at least 10 cities in Africa and also in the United States. In the U.S., you'll find us here in D.C., where we are headquartered, in New York, in Maryland, and Virginia. In Africa, you'll find us in Botswana, in Kenya, in Liberia, and in Egypt and Sudan.
Now, There's so many other people out there doing many, many things across all those countries you just mentioned.
Yes.
What makes you stand out? What's different about B360?
What makes us stand out is definitely not just our understanding of the US-Africa space, but also the fact that we are very passionate about developing solutions, creative solutions that empower communities, solutions that power growth in a huge way.
Yeah, you kind of, you and some like, you know, of like mind like you, Africans tend to say that there is need to have kind of African solutions to certain specific African problems. What is the difference? I mean, people say poverty is poverty anywhere. What is the difference in having some specific understanding about specific situation and a different solution?
Thank you. Key is, yes, you have the issues that definitely are befalling Africa. You have issues of political instability in some parts of Africa. You have the stories of malaria. You do have the stories of HIV. But where we stand out is telling the other story of Africa, the story of an Africa that's on the move, the story of an Africa that is working to develop solutions, the story of an Africa that is leapfrogging other technologies, using various technologies like the M-Pesa in Kenya. So it's definitely been able to tell that other side of the story. Mm-hmm. Then also it's an issue of working with other entities, especially here in the United States and in the US-Africa space, to figure out what are the ways that the US can enable Africans to provide African solutions to African problems.
Some have observed that if Africans got their act together, Africa could sprint to greatest economic development ever if you eliminate corruption, if you have stability and, you know, kind of remove politics from development. When you talk to African leaders, do they seem to get a sense of this, or are they so detached that they're more concerned about their own, you know, ambitions as politicians and business people?
Most definitely, most of the African leaders I've talked to do really understand the cancer that corruption is. Leaders like President Uhuru Kenyatta, they do understand that, and they are working really hard to eliminate corruption. But also we need to understand that corruption is everywhere, even in the United States.
The difference is, sometimes I say, is that in the United States there's corruption, yes, but we find in some of these poorer countries, people are literally taking away all the money that the government is supposed to be using to help even the poorest people in society.
That's true.
How do you, you know, what do you do about that? How do you help such countries develop?
It's on a couple of levels.
Yeah.
First, also is just understanding the background. As I said, yes, there is that story of the corruption, but there's also the other story where these leaders are working hard to eliminate corruption. But then there's also the other story of what Africa is all about. It's an Africa that has, the cultures are a bit different. It's the ways of doing business in Africa. And it's being able to work with the agencies over here. And also areas, countries in the West, enabling and realizing that they can enable Africans to get rid of that.
And we hope for the best, that everybody will actually have the focus to really develop Africa. And thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your experiences with us. Well, Peter Karenga is the CEO of B360. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at @VinceMcCory. Coming up, the green findings in the UN's latest World Drought Report. Stay with us.
My name's Carla Babb, and I work the Pentagon Beach. That access helps me to do better stories. Every day it's my responsibility to collect all of the defense news. It keeps our VOA viewers informed. I get to travel all across the globe. Anything that's defense related and how to protect and keep people safe, that's where I'll go. So it's never a dull moment at the Pentagon. My name is Carla Babb. This is my beat.
Well, it's time now for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with the link between safe burial practices and curbing Ebola. Lino.
And a new study by the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies says that safe burial practices may have helped prevent the transmission of thousands of cases of Ebola during the epidemic in West Africa between 2013 and 2016. The study reveals the traditional burial practice of washing and touching the dead was a major mode of transmission of Ebola during the outbreak in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, as the virus is at its peak when a person dies. While isolating patients is key to preventing the spread of the disease, while the study says early burial is crucial to keeping Ebola in check, authors of the project says the Red Cross had to change its approach in dealing with communities that adhered to traditional burial practices and spoke about safe and dignified burials instead of management of the remains. More than 11,000 people died from Ebola in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea before the epidemic was stopped in those countries in 2016. Now, a new study says climate change could bring malaria risk to Ethiopia's highlands. Experts say Ethiopia's highlands traditionally have a built-in protection against malaria transmission due to the elevation and the cool temperatures. But Bradfield Lyon, a researcher at the University of Maine, found that since 1981, the elevation needed to protect people from malaria has risen by 100 meters. Lyon's study found that temperatures in the Horn of Africa are rising by an average of 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade due to climate change. Lyon emphasizes that this is a meteorological study with no evidence of malaria transmission. However, the research is pointing out that it is possible. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has just released its latest World Drug Report, and beware of opioids. In its latest World Drug Report, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime revealed some 250 million people used drugs in 2015. 0.6% of the global adult population were engaged in problematic use and suffered from drug use disorders, including dependence. Jean-Luc Lemayeux is Director of Policy Analysis and Public Affairs of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime.
The number of problem users is on the increase. Now, that poses enormous challenges with regard to the health apparatus because so far, globally, only 1 on 6 of problem users has access to care and treatments.
The UN Office on Drugs and Crime says opioids were the most harmful drug type and accounted for 70% of the negative health impact associated with drug use disorders worldwide. Opioids are drugs that act on the nervous system to relieve pain. They include the illegal drug heroin, synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, and pain relievers available legally by prescription, such as oxycodone or morphine. The continued use and abuse of opioids can lead to physical dependence and withdrawal symptoms. Disorders related to the use of amphetamines also account for a considerable share of the global burden of disease. The report finds that hepatitis C is causing the greatest harm among the millions of people who inject drugs worldwide. Thomas Pitchman is research officer with the UNODC.
Close to 30 million people have taken a drug equivalent to 0.6% of the global population. Issues of concern to us are the issue of injecting drug use. From injecting drug use, you have people who get hepatitis C. Almost half the people who inject drugs have hepatitis C, and a smaller proportion HIV/AIDS.
This year marks 20 years of the World Drug Report, and it comes at a time when the international community has decided to move forward with joint action to combat drug abuse worldwide. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Linor Moudou. Back to you.
Well, Lino, thank you very much. Now be sure to watch Lino Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, a bakery offers app sweet revenge against online trolls. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. Sudanese in Khartoum react Tuesday after the U.S. Supreme Court partially reinstated President Donald Trump's controversial travel ban. Ugandan lawmakers seek tighter regulation of microcredit service. In South Africa, a new inquest opens up today into the death of Ahmed Timal, an activist arrested in Johannesburg in 1971 who plunged to his death from the city's police headquarters while in detention. In Morocco, dozens of firemen carried out simulation exercises this month to test their readiness for the summer month from May to September. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Now, chocolates, mealworm, cake, and cricket salad, anyone? Well, Polish researchers are looking into future trends in nutrition. The team says insect farming consumes far less water than crops and can be done at home. Insects are frozen, then ground up or thrown straight into a frying pan. Deep-fried crickets taste like roasted chicken. Laver has a nutty flavor and ants are spicy and slightly sour. Most importantly, they're all nutritious. Now, researchers are searching for alternative solutions to feed the world's growing population. By 2050, a 70% rise in food production will be needed with limited agricultural land available. So eat insects. Meanwhile, in other food news, New York City-based baker Kat Tech has a way to handle internet trolls. Let them eat cake. She is the owner of Troll Cakes and Detective Agency, which decorates cakes with negative internet comments and sends them to the people who make the comments, known as trolls in online parlance. For $30 to $60, Troll Cakes bakes and decorates cakes using the troll's exact comments and then packs them into confetti-filled boxes to send to trolls' homes or offices. So far, Tech has sent 4 or 5 dozen cakes, but has not yet heard back from any of the recipients. Well, and finally, at Facebook, mere sharing is getting old. Finding deeper meaning in online communities is the next big thing. CEO Mark Zuckerberg is no longer satisfied with just connecting the world so that people can pass around baby pictures and live video or fake news and hate symbols. The Facebook founder wants to bring more meaning to its nearly 2 billion users by shepherding them into online groups that bring together people with common passions, problems, and ambitions. Facebook will apply the same algorithms to the task of boosting membership in meaningful groups to more than 1 billion people within 5 years. And that is what is trending. That is our show. Good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When something loses its original shape or form, it does not look very natural or comfortable.
Bent out of shape.
Hey, did you tell Greg about my dinner party?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was invited.
Well, now he's all bent out of shape because I didn't invite him.
I'm sorry.